So welcome to part two of our choosing facilities webinar that we are putting out from Nexus. I know that obviously this season right now is a little crazy with webinar madness, it seems like, but it was kind of good to be able to kind of schedule and be a part of a webinar that wasn't all about what to do with the Corona stuff. And I even know that we may even spend a little bit of time on the back end just sharing some ideas, how you guys are doing with all that stuff. But in the midst of not being able to meet in facilities or just kind of struggling through whether you should or not, or different things. Some guys are, some guys aren't. Mr. Greg's going to talk to us about some bigger picture items when it comes to looking at facilities. So we'll go ahead and pass it off to him, and I'll bring up some slides for you.
Okay. Well, I know that Dave and Matthew, you guys actually lead a network. And so this is going to be maybe some good advice that you can hand off to your guys as your guys get to that point of needing some facility. So kind of needless to say, I mean, this whole building thing begins with vision. And it's kind of like a three-part of vision, vision and goals. And so when you think about your future plans and the vision of what you're going to have in the future, you got to like when I was in school, when I was in grad school, finishing up my master's degree, I had a professor that he gave us an assignment, and we had to go out to a couple of neighboring cities, and we had to count all the one building churches, all the two building churches, and any campus style churches. And what was interesting about that, I've had, I usually give that as an assignment to the guys that I coach that are just arriving in their community life. That's one of the very first things I ask them to do after they arrive in town and they've set up the house and they put all the boxes away. The very first assignment I tell them is go out and do that very thing. And that's because when you look at a one building church, that means there was just enough vision capacity when that church was built, whether it was in the late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe even up to maybe the 1950s or 1960s. Most of our churches were built in a one building structure, and that was the entire vision. It was a matter of, this is a community type church, and we are here to reach people. And I love that aspect. That was the vision of the church coming to America in the 1800s. Nothing wrong with it. It's a great plan. And tons of churches were planted on that premise and that process, but that was the vision. But when you look at the two building churches, usually what happened was this. There was a pastor who came in, maybe post-1940s, post-1950s, and that pastor had a vision. It was a bigger vision than the initial launch of that church and how it got started. Evangelism kind of took the forefront, and the so-called idea of lost people and reaching a community for Christ and being on mission and all those kind of phrases started coming into play. So what happened was the church began to grow. And so when the church began to grow, then, well, you have to build another building. And the first building usually became a children's building, or it became the fellowship hall, or whatever you want to give it, but at least they had two buildings. But what happened was when that pastor moved on, or if that pastor passed away while leading that church, then the next guy who came in obviously probably didn't carry on that vision. But they just saw it as a blessing that they were able to get to a church that had two buildings and was maybe running 200 or 300 people. And you kind of begin to realize that was kind of the vision then. A church of 200 or 300 was a great sized church, and there's no doubt about it. It is a great sized church. And then somewhere around the 1970s, 1980s, you began to have the campus style churches, and there's maybe 1 to 2 of those per community, and we call them today the mega churches, the churches that are running. Today, mega churches more or less defined by churches that are running more like around 3,000, because there's so many churches that are running 1,000 these days. So the mega church now is more classified around the 3,000 and up range. And these guys usually have 50 to 100 acres. and they have a sprawling campus, and they've got athletic fields and all kinds of things. So anyway, that was the assignment. We had to go around and count all of these things, that we begin to see the history of the church basically in these facilities. And those one building churches were usually on anywhere from 1 to 3 acres, and those 2 building facilities were usually on 2 to 5 acres. And then of course the big churches were anywhere from 15 acres and up. But vision is a key factor. And vision is going to drive everything. And I know we sometimes maybe get tired of hearing that, but that is a reality. If you're going to go to a lending institution, whether it be the 3 in our movement or any secular bank, they're going to ask you what your vision is. And if you cannot articulate a good vision, then there's no way they're going to lend you money, because you don't know what you want to do. And they're not going to loan money to a guy who does not show leadership. So you got to have a vision. Now, what I'm thinking all the time when I coach guys is, all right, what does this church look like 20 years from now? Because I want to know what that looks like 20 years from now. I want to know that you've thought that through 20 years from now. And I know some guys will want to push back and say, well, we don't know. We don't know what the community is going to look like. And I usually think, bull. You need to know what this church is going to look like. God gave you a vision. So you haven't wrestled enough with this vision to know what God wants you to do in the long haul future. So at least have a basic idea. And that means you should be also examining what your community looks like and what does your community lack. So let's just say you're in a smaller community, and maybe your community does not have softball fields or soccer fields. Well, is it possible that you could provide that for the community, that you could provide a complete athletic facility for your community, so that way adult soccer leagues could be started and youth soccer leagues could be started, and all those kind of things could take place. Like the sky's the limit on what you can do when it comes to vision, but look at your community and start thinking about what your community lacks and why does it lack that in the community, and what is the city doing or not doing to meet that need. And then again, is it possible that you can meet that need? Let's see. All right, so with those things in mind here really quick, again, if you put in your notes, 20 years from now, what will this facility be able to do, or what will it be able to accomplish? I think that's some of the other good things that you need to be asking yourself. Once you've wrestled with the vision, I think what you need to be able to ask yourself, and I've said this to numerous guys, we have to get off the idea that we're going to be a mega church one day. We have to ask ourselves the more realistic question is, all right, am I a 200 kind of guy? Am I a 300 kind of guy, a 500 kind of guy, a 700 kind of guy, or maybe do I have a church of 1,000 in me? Because I think that's the real mark of maturity, is when we begin to realize, how did God design me, and what kind of leadership skills do I have, and what kind of leadership skills do I possess? Therefore, taking a look at my own skill set, am I a 200 guy, a 300 guy, a 500 guy, et cetera, et cetera? And then own it, because there's nothing wrong with owning that. Now, again, I look at that as an incredible mark of maturity. So I would say, praise God to you that you know what kind of a pastor you are and the capacity of leadership that you have. And then therefore you can look around and say, okay, based on my vision, based on my goals, based on a 20-year plan, and based on the idea that, let's just say I'm a 500 guy, then that is going to determine what we need. Does that make sense to everybody? Because when we've wrestled with our heart and we've wrestled with our leadership ability, now we can be able to fulfill that 20-year vision of what God wants without breaking the bank and without overextending ourselves that we don't need to do. So if you're going to be a church of 500, let's say you feel like, yeah, you know what? I think God's designed me to be a 500 guy. All right, so I'm going to lead a congregation of 500. All right, so then I would say, all right, are you a one worship kind of guy, or 1 hour worship kind of guy, or are you a multiple service kind of guy? Because if you're multiple services, then that means that you might need to have a facility that can seat 300 because you could easily pull off 2 services that would have you be a church of 500. This is the whole entire strategic thinking process that we need to go through to be able to build the right facility, take the right amount of loan, and take the right amount of risk. So you can then look at it and say, all right, well, maybe I just need 5 acres to 6 acres or 7 acres, and I could put one large building facility in the middle, almost like when was the last time you went to a professional sporting venue? Usually you have your baseball stadium in the middle and you have parking all around it, right? So you put your building smack in the middle of your 5 to 7 acre property and you just surround it with your parking lots, because that's all you're going to need. Or if you want to provide that recreation space because your community needs it, not necessarily because you want it, but because your community needs it and you want to be able to provide that as an opportunity for your congregation and your community, then you've got to be able to know where you're going to put that facility and where your parking goes around your entire campus. Whether that's, again, 5 acres to 10 acres on the smaller venue type church. All right. I'm just going to spew out a whole bunch of things, and then we'll circle back and we'll start taking some questions. So once you get ready to buy something, let's say you've got some money in the bank. We'll talk about finances here in a little bit, but let's say you got some money in the bank and you're thinking, okay, I'm ready to buy 15 acres of land. I think I'm a church of 750, and I want a campus style facility. I want to have extra things on my campus. Okay, great. What you need to be able to do is this: before you go start building buildings, this is a critical step that most guys miss, is you have to master plan this acreage. I think anything above, anything above 7 acres, you need a master plan. And why? Because if you buy 10 acres of land and you just start building a building and you haven't thought about anything else in that property yet, that building now determines everything else that you can do at this point in time. You made the first critical mistake, because now that building is the determining factor about what you can and can't do going forward. So you got to master plan your whole entire place, because you can sit down with an architect. They can pick your brain about what you want to see, and then they can start putting this thing down on paper. And it's kind of like a painting. It becomes a masterpiece that you're able to see. And you can be able to see, this is building 1, this is phase 2, this is phase 3, this is where the soccer fields go, whatever. This is where the parking is, and we can expand and do these kinds of things. The reason why that's critical is this. A lot of guys want to haul off and just build a 10,000 square foot building. And then again, first of all, I'm telling you, that's critical mistake number 1. But then critical mistake number 2 is, did we build that facility with the ability to expand it? Or did I build myself a closed-ended facility because the structure does not allow it to be expanded? So these are all critical things. That's why the master plan aspect of this is a critical point. All right. Once you have the master plan and you can see the whole entire picture, and it's like a masterpiece in front of your face, and you go, that's it. Then you start looking at, okay, what do I build? Because what I'm going to say to you is going to sound absolutely ridiculous. Your worship center is not necessarily the first building that you're going to build. It could be something else. It could be your children's building is the first building that you build, because that it's more feasible from a cost effect standpoint than to build the big worship center. I'll tell you a story about that. When we were building our second facility at my church down there in Needville, we had the master plan, right? And we had a worship center on one side, a family lifestyle YMCA looking building on the other side. And then we had this big lobby that ran between these two buildings. And we got the price tag on the worship center, and it was just astronomical in price. And then we got the price of the YMCA looking facility, and it came out to like, I don't know, $3.5 million. And I remember this well because it was one of maybe the one or two times in my entire life that I had the flu. And I was lying on the floor, and I think I had a fever like 102 or something like that. I was sick as a dog. And my team is calling me with all of these things and all these questions and all these price tags of these buildings that are being bid. And I thought, man, we can't do this. And as I was sick with a fever, it dawned on me. I thought, well, wait a minute. What about the lobby? And so I called my team leader and I said, hey, how much would it cost to build the lobby? And his first reaction was, you must be really sick because you can't build a lobby. And I said, well, why not? And he goes, well, because it's just a lobby. I said, how big is that lobby? And he goes, so they ran the numbers on it. He came back and he says, well, it's about a 19,000 square foot lobby. And I said, right. And I said, that's where the kitchen is, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, that's where the bathrooms are, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, how much would that cost? And so they ran the numbers and it came out to $1.2 million. And we all went like, well, that's what we need to build. So we actually built our lobby of a 3-phase building facility. It was our second phase of a build out because we already had our first structure. So we ended up building a 19,000 square foot lobby. And if you ever drive to our place, it looks like the Ark had run aground on our property because we just got this big old long 19,000 square foot. I mean, it looks like, with the pitch of the roof, it looks like it's the Ark that had been flipped over. It's just a long, dumb looking building. However, it seats 500 and that's where the bathrooms are. And so we've been in that facility now for 10 years and it has allowed our church to grow significantly because we ended up building a lobby before anything else. So there's a phrase, right? Because you guys know me, there's a lot of Gregisms out there from the guys that I coach. And the Gregism that comes out of the building phase of coaching is this. There's faith, there's miracles, and it ain't gonna happen. Okay, faith, miracles, ain't gonna happen. So what do I mean by that? Aren't I negating what God can do? No. If you go with me on what I'm saying, if you want to build a $10 million building and you're running 100 people, that ain't going to happen. Now, could God work miracles? Of course, God could work miracles, but it would literally take a miracle for that to happen. Because no banking institution, and I don't care how great of a leader you are, no bank is going to lend you $10 million for a church of 100 people to build a $10 million facility. It's just not going to happen. So I always want to work under faith and miracles because I want my people to have enough faith to see it happen. And I need God to show up and do some miracles. And then that way my people understand how God works hand in hand with us. So we were looking at a $5 to $6 million facility, and then we were looking at about a $2.5 to $3 million facility, and we settled on a $1.2 million facility. Why? Because it was going to require a whole bunch of faith to build a $1.2 million building, and I needed God to show up and show us his grace. So that's where you begin to work in the sweet spot of faith and miracles, and not asking God to do some incredible, unbelievable miracles before your eyes to come up with the $10 million project. So that's what I'm trying to talk about. But if you don't have a master plan, you can't see that. If you don't have the master plan, you can't see the options. If you don't have a master plan, you don't see where it all fits. If you don't have a master plan, you're shooting in the dark about what you're trying to get accomplished. And it doesn't allow you to have other options. So what happens is that you end up building what you can afford, and that is not necessarily the best thing for you to build at that moment. There still might be something better for you to build. Now, if you look at the notes there, you've got the pinkish purplish arrow, and it says you can't make small big, but you can make big small. That's another one of those Gregisms that I talk to the guys about. Is this: when you build a facility, build the largest thing that you can possibly build. But when you build it, even on the interior, it's the same thing. Keep the rooms large. There's several reasons for this. All right, let's go with a simple, basic 10,000 square foot facility. All right, so you have 10,000 square feet. You could easily have a worship center of about 300. You could have yourself a decent sized little lobby, and then you could probably get maybe 4 classrooms and maybe a small serving kitchen, a warming kitchen, and that'd be a great 10,000 square foot facility. However, what I would say is, don't build 4 classrooms or 3 classrooms. Build one large room, because in that one large room, you can break it down into 4 classrooms on a Sunday. But as soon as Sunday is done, you can break that room back out to a very large room again. That can be used for youth group on Wednesday night. It could be used for a large community meeting of some sort. You might be able to do a town hall meeting in that sort of facility, that kind of a room. There's all kinds of things that you could do with a room that size. Therefore, you also have to think strategically. So let's not paint giraffes, and let's not paint the ark, and let's not paint Noah on the walls. Let's just keep the walls generic. Because once you start putting those kinds of things on the walls, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but the women are going to claim it. It's the children's facility now, and you cannot do anything else in those rooms but children. So don't go there. If you build classrooms, because that's just better for you, look, it's still your building, and it's going to be your thing. You got to remember, it's more expensive to build all those extra walls, and it's more expensive to put all those extra electrical plugs in, and it's more expensive to put all those extra lights in. It's more expensive to do all that kind of stuff. So you're actually wasting money making all of these smaller rooms. And those things are forever and always going to be a small classroom of sorts. So you just kind of shot yourself in the foot, because you got yourself a 10,000 square foot facility, but you really only have about 8,000 square feet of usable space. So don't do it. Allow yourself to be large in all capacity, so that you can keep doing more things for your community. And all you got to do is knock down the temporary walls on a Sunday, and you're back to large. If you build your lobby in a way that is not cluttered, then guess what? You also given yourself another classroom space, because you could put a small group in that front lobby every night of the week. And if you wanted to break your large room down into the classrooms again, now you actually have like 4 classrooms, and your lobby makes 5 classrooms. If you keep your worship center with portable chairs, and when I say portable chairs, guys, I mean literally like the white plastic chairs from Lifetime that you can buy at Sam's or Costco. Those chairs are usually about $19. Unfortunately, they do not last a lifetime, but they do last a pretty good long time. You're going to get a lot of use out of that $19 chair. If you buy a pew-style chair from Bertolini Chairs, you're going to pay about $75 a chair. And you have to move those things, rack them, and everything else. And if you leave them up when kids are doing things or youth are doing things, then you're going to get stains on them. It's not worth it. I want to keep, so here's the other thing. We're church planters, right? I want to keep my church thinking and operating like a church plant all the way through. So some of you guys know this about my church, but every single Sunday, we set chairs up at 7:30 in the morning. And the second hour of our worship service on Sunday, they take it all down, because at 2 o'clock that afternoon, baton twirlers are going to come in from the community, and they're going to use the other half of the worship center for baton twirling. The preschool is setting up for preschool. That's going to start taking place at 6:30 a.m. on Monday morning. And so we are continuing to operate our church like a church plant for all the 15 years of our life, we are still 15 years later setting up chairs and taking chairs down and operating like a church plant, because we live on this philosophy of you can't make small big, but you can make big small. So we want as much space as we possibly can. If you come to our church right now, you are going to find 5 small rooms. But we also have at this point in time about 36,000 square feet of building space. Those 5 classrooms were the last thing that we built in the last phase of our build out. So it wasn't the first thing we built, and it wasn't the second thing we built. It was the last thing that we built. And by the way, we don't have any offices in our facilities. I don't believe in them. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money, and it's a waste of effort, because now you have a staff that just kind of holds themselves up in their offices. They don't come out. They don't see people. They don't go out and do things with people. And once again, you are wasting space. I know a lot of guys. There's a church on the north side of town. It's actually called Northside Church. It's one of our Christian churches. And this guy built a super expensive facility. And they built a high dollar, high tech office suite. And as soon as they moved in, within 8 months, they ripped up all of that office suite because they needed more space for children's ministry. So one of the other things you have to remember is this. As soon as you build something, even if you renovate something, you are going to grow. And I know guys love to push back on me on that, but it's just a simple reality. You can't argue the numbers, and you can't argue the statistics. You are going to grow anywhere from 30 to 50% upon completion of a renovation or a build out from scratch. And you will likely have a better chance of completely doubling your church's attendance. So is it about the building? No, absolutely it is not about the building. But buildings are what? There's another Gregism right here. And what I always tell guys is this: a building is a tool. So we don't have any great looking facilities at our church. In fact, if you came looked at our church, they're not great looking at all. And the interior is pretty bland, plain and simple. And so what I already told all of our guys is this: our whole entire leadership team, I tell our entire congregation, and I tell our staff all the time, these are workhorses. They are to be used. And all we have to do is put new paint on once a year, and it'll look nice for about 3 months, and then they become tarnished and dirty and everything else, because we got kids everywhere. I want our buildings used 7 days a week. So I'm not building the Taj Mahal, and I'm not building a so-called sanctuary, all right, where we can't do extra things in them. I'm building a workhorse, and I expect it to be used. I expect holes in the walls, and I expect us to be able to repair those holes in the walls, because if we're not doing any of those things, then we're wasting time and we're wasting space, and we've just wasted money if we're not going to use it for complete access to ministry. So if you're going to build a simple 10,000 square foot facility, build it for the purpose of being used 7 days a week. That means the lobby. When we built our first facility, it was 7,500 square feet. You wouldn't believe how many times people came and wanted to rent our small little lobby. But that's because it was just a really nice lobby at the time. I mean, we had basic concrete floors, but one of our guys came in with a skill saw in a high dollar blade, and he scored as if it was tile. And so he just scored it on the floor and made a diamond tile check pattern. And then we stained the floors, which, by the way, guys, I highly recommend staining your floors. That way, it doesn't matter what the youth group does. It doesn't matter that you got children in there. It doesn't matter you do a baby shower or a wedding shower, because if something spills, all you do is mop it up. If a pizza falls on the floor and it falls face down, all you got to do is pick it up and mop it up. You're going to spend more money on carpeting, even tile carpeting, and that's just a waste of money. So do everything in a way where you either put down ceramic tile that's easily washed and cleaned, or just leave it the concrete and stain it. It's a great way to go. All right, let's talk about. Let's see. Oh, all right. And another thing that you need to do, I kind of got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. if you go back to the vision stage and the 20-year plan stage, after you do that, before you build anything or buy anything, you got to go interview the lenders. Now, we know that in our movement, we've got the Solomon Foundation, we have CFR, Church Financial Resources, and we have CDF, Church Development Fund. All three are great lending institutions. Places, they're all good guys with great hearts, and they want to see the church win and the church succeed. So what I want you to be able to do is take all of these guys out, interview them, invite them out to your place. They're going to come out and take a look, and they want to hear your vision again. They want to see your finances, and they want to know where you're going, and they want to see why you're doing what you're doing. The Solomon Foundation is one of the only one of the three that actually has a built-in metrics that determines your leadership style. Kind of bizarre, but they actually base a lot of it on you and your leadership capacity. Now, I want you to interview all three of these guys, and I'm going to put it in a strange way for you, but like I want you to date them, and then after you date them for a while, I want you to pick one, and I want you to marry that guy. All right, I want you to marry that organization. The longer haul that you go with these organizations, the more fringe benefits you're going to get down the road, such as the lending institution that I have. The way they do big dollar ticket mortgages these days with the new rules after 2008 is that they can extend your life of the loan like 40 years, 50 years, and 60 years by doing these short-term type things. And that's how you are able to afford these buildings, by the way. So after 10 years, we are under a renewal right now. So we just renewed our loan. And so because we've been with these guys for 10 years now, and we stayed with them, like as a reward for, what's that word I'm looking for? The reward for being committed. I can't think of the word right now. But for staying with these guys and renewing our loan with these guys, we have a total of $2.6 million on loan right now. To renew a loan after 10 years, and to renew a loan of that size anytime, you got to pay a certain percentage of the closing cost, right? So it was going to cost us $20,000 to renew our loan. So loyalty, that's what I was after, the loyalty thing. So because we're like a loyal partner with them, they waived our $20,000. So we did not have to cough up $20,000 right now to renew our loan and close the loan. And that's in the middle of this whole entire coronavirus thing and virtual church right now. And who knows what our offerings are going to be like when this thing is all said and done. So they waived the $20,000 fee just because we've been a loyal friend and a loyal partner and a loyal customer, you could say. So date these guys. Once you date them, pick one. Once you pick one, marry them and stick with them. You're going to have a better relationship down the road. As soon as you pick one, whatever money you have in the bank, put it on deposit with them and start earning some interest with them. When you put money on deposit with any one of these three institutions, then they're going to be able to loan you money down the road. So what they usually require is this: whatever your monthly payment is going to be. Let's say your monthly payment is going to be $7,000 a month. Then they're going to require usually 3 months of payments on deposit in the bank. So you can do the math on that real quick. They're going to want $21,000 on deposit. Okay. So make sure that you do some pre-crunching of the numbers to make sure that you can even afford these things and start talking to these guys. You don't want to waste their time. However, what isn't ever going to be a waste of time is to pick who that partner is going to be and just start putting money in the bank with them. I had how do you start making some money, or how do you start putting money in the bank with these guys? When I launched my church 15 years ago, so I didn't have Nexus, and I didn't have Stadia. So we were like an independent church plant on our own. I came up with a crazy financial plan. It was, I called it 10, 30, 30, 30. So I put 10% to missions. I put 30% to payroll one day. I put 30% to the general fund, and I put 30% away to buy land. So, you know, in those early days, like when you have a $1,000 offering, let's just keep the math simple. It was $100 for our community, which is missions. It was $300 towards payroll. It was $300 towards the general fund, and it was $300 towards buying land. And so when we actually started averaging $1,000 a week, well, you can, because that's easy math, then you begin to realize that's $300 every week that we're investing with an organization that's going to help us buy land one day. So that's quickly what? That's $1,200 every single month. And so what does that come out to? It comes out to roughly what? $16,000 in 1 year. That's how fast you can actually start saving money to buy land. That's good strategy. It shows good leadership. And guess what these guys are going to say? Hey, this guy has a plan. This guy knows what he's doing. He's making the effort, and he's consistent with it. And so he's got money now. Let's get him what he needs. You have to work with your lenders, and you got to tell them your vision, and you got to tell them what you're willing to do to make it all happen. It is a critical factor in building the buildings you want to build one day, and or buying the land that you want to buy one day. All right. How much are they going to lend you? They're going to lend you anywhere from 40 to 50% of your total budget. All right. That might sound like that's a big loan. And do I want 50% of my budget going to a building payment? My answer to you is yes. Here's why. Because if you have a 30 to 50% growth rate when you're done, then that's also the metrics that these guys are working on. So they're going to look at it and say, okay, within 3 months of you opening your facility, that 50% of your total budget is going to come back down to the sweet spot of somewhere between 35 and 45% of your budget. And the more you continue to grow from there, it's going to come really down to the really sweet spot of about 30 to 35%. All right. They're factoring in the fact that you're going to have some growth when you build this facility. So it's a temporary 40 to 50% of budget debt ratio, and they expect it to come back into the 30% range. Build the biggest thing that you can build, but build it according to the master plan, and don't get hung up on the idea that I got to build my worship center first. You might be building your children's ministry building first. You might worship in it for a little while before you build your next facility and move out. And now that's all children's ministry, because you don't need it all for children's ministry. A couple of other mistakes that guys make when they start building buildings anyway is this. They build it according to the adult worship when they should be building it according to children's ministry. So a healthy percentage ratio in children's ministry is this. If you average 100 people, 30 of those 100 should be children, right? So it's a 30% ratio. So for every 100 people that you have worshiping in your church, 30 of them should be kids. So if you have a church of 200, that means 60 of those should be kids. That means you should have 140 adults. So the real question is, the real question is not how many adults can I fit in this building. It's how many kids can I fit in this building. That's the big difference. And that's where a lot of guys make the mistake. Quit building your buildings according to adults and how many adults you can sit in a chair. Build it according to how many children you can get in your facility based on that 30% ratio. All right. That's the key factor. That's what size building you should be building according to that. You also have to remember a lot of percentages and ratios in here. You have to remember that a building is full at 70% these days. It's no longer full at 80%. All of our cell phone use, we've become a more distant kind of community of people, society of people. And so people want space between them. So your building is full at 70%. So if you build a 100 adult seating capacity, then you're going to be full at 70, which means you need to go to 2 services. It's not a matter of saying, no, I want 80 to 90 people in my building before I go to 2 services. It's more like when you have, if you have a seating capacity of 100, you should be thinking of going to 2 services at 50 and 60, so that when you hit 70 for 3 weeks in a row, you pull the trigger and go to 2 services. That's how fast you should be working on these things. If you have to wait 1 year before you need to go to 2 services, then you probably shouldn't go to 2 services anymore, because you just shot yourself in the foot. You now have a small church syndrome building in your church facility. I'm all about speed. I'm all about expediting things. And because I'm a firm believer that if you stall the engine doesn't work the same way anymore. I've had plenty of lawnmowers over my life. You stall that lawnmower engine and it just doesn't seem to work as good as the next time, especially as the church gets older. So you want to keep that engine running and humming. You want to be paying attention to the Holy Spirit and what God's doing in your church. So again, you're full at 70. That means at 50 and 60, you should be looking at going to 2 services. That when you hit 70 for 3 weeks in a row, you're going to 2 services immediately. That prevents you from having to build more buildings. It prevents you from having to expand that facility so fast. So I'm a huge proponent of buying land and building buildings and renovating buildings, but I'm also a huge proponent of put multiple services in your facility so that you don't necessarily have to build the second building so stinking fast. Now I'm gonna contradict myself with this next statement. All right, you ready? At the same time, don't be afraid to build that second facility. The first building that you build in a church plant is not the hard thing. That's the easy thing, because everybody knows, well, we got to get a building at some point in time. So that's the easy sell. The hardest thing that you got to do is sell them on the second facility. So if you go back to what I was saying when I was working on my master's degree, and the assignment was to go out and look at 1 building churches and 2 building churches, et cetera, there's a ton of 1 building churches out there. You know why? Because they were never able to talk their congregation into building the second facility. So you can get that first building built. The real test of your leadership is going to get the second building built. If you can get the second building built, then guess what? The third building is easy. Because now they understand we are building facilities to accommodate the vision and accommodate the goal, not because pastor wants a big church on his hands, because it fits the vision and the goal, which is the very first thing that we're talking about on the notes there. Your buildings and your structures are a complement and are a tool to the long haul vision that you're working on. So again, let's get away from numbers and get away from churches of 1,000 and all that kind of crap. Just don't even go there. These are workhorses. These are tools of the trade. Just like a plumber needs wrenches, a church facility needs a nimble, multi-use facility. And everything that you build should be multi-use. So getting back to, like we built this 19,000 square foot facility, and it's a lobby. But since then, again, we've had cheerleading competitions in that facility. We have baton twirling in that facility. We host the community school district's 8th grade graduation dance. We host for about 4 years, we held the father-daughter dance for the community there. We have the high school graduation all-night party there. We have preschool in there. That's 7 things right there, and there's plenty of other things that we do in this community that all takes place in that facility. So it's got to be a workhorse. All right, let me stop there for a second. And I don't even know how long, what's the time frame here? Holy cow, are you kidding me? Okay, so what questions do you guys have? None?
Greg, early on you were talking about assessing what kind of a leader you are when you're
I have a question, Greg.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I live in a very expensive community. It was getting more expensive all the time. How do you think this current economy is going to benefit us over here, Bozeman?
Yeah. So right now we're in a. Hey Andrew, how about if you take the notes off so that we can see everybody? We can see the whole gallery of who's here. All right. Thank you. We are all obviously in the great unknown, right? We have no idea what this thing is going to do to our economy, other than we pretty much know it's going to trash our economy. So could land prices go down? Yeah, land prices could go down. The whole entire real estate is going to probably go down. That means there are some buildings that maybe are available that are going to come down in price. And here's the other very unfortunate thing, is that there's probably going to be a lot of companies and strip centers that are going to go belly up. And they're not going to have anybody to rent these things anymore. Small, let's say some maybe 30,000 square foot type warehouse facilities that companies have been running out of are going to go belly up. So there's probably going to be a flooded market of maybe some 30,000 square foot type warehouse facilities that are going to go on the market. Which means that for some of you guys, you could maybe lease that 30,000 square foot facility that was out of your league just a couple of months ago. But at the same time, we still don't know how our own churches are going to recover, right? Because we don't know what's really going to happen here. The longer we are out of our church facilities, whatever facility that we have, the more like we already know it only takes 3 weeks for people to have a new habit, correct? So we are on the cusp of potentially having a brand new habit forced upon us that a lot of our people may not ever come back to worship, because they're always going to look for you on Facebook, because it's just going to be a whole lot easier. So what our nation is basically forcing upon us is really crazy what's going to happen to the whole entire church as a whole. So I don't know what's going to happen to us, and I don't know what's going to happen to our offerings. All I know is that the church, as we have known it, is not going to be the same coming out of this thing. Even if they lift it by Easter Sunday, guys. Easter Sunday, I have felt from day one a gut feeling that they're going to lift this thing by Easter Sunday, because I don't think they want the outcry and the outrage of America not being able to go to worship on Easter Sunday. Even though we are not necessarily a Christian nation anymore, we are by name. And they're going to want what they feel is comfort to them. So I think our churches are going to be full on Easter Sunday, because there's going to be a feel of comfort and longing and desire, because we've been holed up in our homes and we're going to want to be there. But what does that still translate the very next week? I don't know. We all know that the Sunday after Easter is the worst attendance Sunday in all of America already anyway. So we're going to go right back to this new training that we're under right now, which is to watch by Facebook. So Tony, the only thing I can tell you is this. I really don't know. I've got some gut feelings about some things that are going to go on. I think the church can recover maybe to some semblance of what we think is the new norm, or what has been normal is what I meant by that. But I don't know how fast or if it ever will. I think we're all going to have a difficult time with our finances. I don't think it's going to recover all that fast. And, just a pet peeve of mine, I don't want any money from the government, because I'm still going to have to pay taxes on it. So why bother? Just keep it. And I don't want it. But so I think there's going to be a flooding of the market. There's also going to be a lot of churches that are going to go belly up also. If you go back and look at the disaster zones, right, along the Atlantic coast and the Gulf Coast, if you go back to Katrina and Rita, hurricanes from the early 2000s, I think they were like 2005, 2006 timeframe. 100 churches in Louisiana never came back. Right? The churches got destroyed, the people moved out, and the churches all went belly up. 100 churches. So New Orleans, right, one of our dark cities in America, got darker because 100 churches never recovered, and not too many people are planting churches in New Orleans. So there's going to be some churches that are going to go belly up. You know what? maybe possibly there's going to be some church buildings that are going to become available that we hadn't thought about before. So maybe some of us can be able to buy some old church buildings from some churches that went belly up. Tony, you asked a great question, and the reality is, nobody really knows. I think everybody wants to get back to normal, but I think there's going to be so much damage done by a lot of people. Because what most people don't realize right now is that we are entering a time of high stress with people, and stress leads to depression. And then sometimes depression at a time like this could lead to a higher spike in suicide. And the reason is because there are some people out there that truly believe that they're going to die in 2 weeks. I've been trying to get on every national Zoom call I can get on to hear what's going on. And like 48,000 people committed suicide just last year. And how many people have died from this virus? Like hardly anybody in America, when you think about the ratios. It's still at about a 1% clip of a mortality rate. So yet what people see and hear is, oh my gosh, this is a terrible thing. And yeah, it is a terrible thing. But there are some people who literally are shaking in their boots thinking, man, if I get sick, I'm dead in 2 weeks, because that's what's happening. But it's not happening. So there's a fear and anxiety thing that's going on. And Tony, I think it could work to our advantage from the church, because look, I don't know what you guys have done from the virtual, Facebook Live and pre-recorded things and all that kind of stuff going on. But we, in the 3 years that we've been doing Facebook Live, we just had our largest audience ever. Now, I can't explain it. We just surpassed the 2,000 hit mark on our live thing that's on Facebook. I'm not even a tech enough person to even talk about it, but that's insanity, because we're in a town of 2,800 people. It's amazing what's happening nationwide, because again, we can all see what people post on Facebook. It's as if God has hit the pause button. So again, I'm kind of rambling right now. Tony, get back to your question. I don't know, Tony. Sky's the limit. But I think we need to be keeping our eyes open for the 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 30,000 warehouses from companies that are going to go belly up in this catastrophe of our economy that we're entering into. And they might come up very cheap. Or if anything, you might be able to lease it for a very cheap price, which is another topic real quick. If you lease a facility, you cannot take a loan to renovate a leased facility. You're going to have to do a cash project, because you don't have any collateral to be able to get a loan to renovate a leased facility. So you got to be very careful with that, guys. So if you have $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in the bank, then you're going to probably use all of that to renovate the facility that you lease. So the thing that you have to ask yourself in that kind of a situation is, how long am I going to be here? Is this really in my best interest to drop 30 grand, 40 grand into a leased facility if I'm going to be gone in 2 years? So you're going to have to really think about the long vision and the absolute strategy of where we are right now before you pull the trigger on those kind of things.
What's been your observation about sharing a established church facility on a short term? And we're not going to get back on our school till May 17th at the earliest.
Right.
And if they open it up that we can meet at Easter time, I got a sister or friend at the church down the road that said I could use his space on Sunday night.
Yeah. Desperate times call for desperate measures. That's the old saying. And I say that, for the time being, that might be a good fix. I don't know if it's necessarily a long-term fix. We've got a guy in our network. You guys all know him, David Lamagnier. He rents a facility that he shares with another church, and they have arguments and they bicker a lot, and it's not necessarily an easy relationship. And if one church grows more than the other one grows, then there's animosity and there's jealousy. It's all kinds of crap that begins to happen. However, for the next 3 weeks, if you have that opportunity, I would jump on that. I mean, If I'm a church planter in phase one and I don't have anything, I'm a risk taker. I'd roll the dice on that risk, and I'd go take that risk. Which is another quick thing real fast. Risk is a big factor in this whole building thing, guys. And you're going to have to wrestle with how much risk you're willing to take. And I look at it as this. I can present my goal, I can present my vision, and I can tell these lenders what I want to do. And I look at it going, it's not my risk, it's their risk. Because they're the ones that are going to provide the money to make it happen. So I kind of look at it going, I'm not risking anything. They're the ones taking the risk. So you give me as much money as you can possibly give me, and I'll build the biggest thing I can possibly build, because then I'm going to be trusting God and he's going to fill it. And so not my risk, it's their risk. But you're going to have to wrestle with some risk. One of the things that amazes me about this whole entire process is that we are church planters with enough risk and faith to start something from scratch, but then all of a sudden we don't have enough risk and faith to take the next step. So you need to wrestle with the risk factor. So Tony, I would say to you again, if you have the opportunity to jump in with another church in a temporary setting, I'm doing it. It's better than being out on the streets.
Good. Well, hey guys, I know I want to be respectful of your time. It's a little just after, I guess, 2:00 Central. So if there's any other questions that you guys have, feel free to reach out to Greg. But we appreciate you guys joining us.
All right, guys. Everybody, hang in there. Let's see. Before everyone jumps out, hey, Brant, how about if you close us in prayer, because this is a crazy time for all of us.
All right. Father, I ask you just give wisdom, peace, and courage as we live out this adventure in the days to come. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, guys, hang in there.